Knight takes knight. Yes, a forcing move. So here, bishop takes rook. So the knight, actually, the last move of the knight, means that it's given black a new candidate move. So bishop takes rook. And that's one shortcut as well, which I'd like to mention. The very last move often implies important candidate moves. So had the master had to analyse every single candidate move, it would be extremely exhausting. He's just looked at the last move played. Yeah, knight takes knight, and there's a new possibility: bishop takes rook. So does this simple bishop takes rook refute knight takes knight? Rook pawn takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. Rook takes pawn. And now we see the unleashing of this bishop on this diagonal. So there's a potential for a discovered check if the queen moves. So it is a very sharp position here. Just on the climax actually of white using the isolated pawn in the outpost, before white's attack disappears, he must do something with it. There's that point in the game, which often occurs actually, because white's accepted this, structural, isolated queen's pawn, and that is the attacking compensation. So here it looks quite dangerous after this rook takes pawn. Pawn takes queen, because white's queen was left hanging. Rook takes queen check. King to rook 2. And here the assessment is the exchange down, the queen pawn is weak, and black's bishop is strong. That's right, yeah, black's bishop is strong. So we notice now some verbal assessment there, which wasn't apparently present in looking at this line. In fact, if we look at this line again, could we have done some verbal assessments already? Like after knight takes knight, i.e. temporarily sacrificing the exchange on g3. So hg, giving white potentially semi-open file, but that's a bit useless here. The double pawns are quite weak, and this bishop is now quite powerful. So fg, which attacks white's queen. So do I want to leave the queen and pre, or is there something even more dangerous? In fact, here it's interesting to note that the master didn't look at candidate moves here. Like moving his queen away would be a logical one. Couldn't he just move his queen away to keep an eye on this e6? Because although the exchange down, is it totally desperate to do something immediately like rook takes pawn? It seems like a committal blunder if black can just take the queen, and after the discovered check, then king h7. And rook e8 double check doesn't make because of king h7. But does it secure a draw, in fact? Because king h7, bishop g8. Let's have a look at that. So g takes. So in this position, after rook takes, g takes, this queen sack, check, king g8. Now there's no draw, is there, with bishop g8 because of king g6. But in this position, if we're looking at it with Ribka, is there something here? After the queen, rook takes, instead of rook takes pawn, Ribka thinks white's worse. So queen e2, and the main thing is bishop d5. So that puts an end to this diagonal and that bishop on b3. Okay, now apparently, so the master is fictionally going through a different candidate move now, and he says, what about bishop takes rook's pawn? And then he says, have a look. So pawn takes bishop, queen takes pawn. So what compensation here has white got? There's a threat now, an imminent threat of knight g6 and rook h3. So this actually looks very dangerous as well, initially. But after bishop takes knight, so that relieves some of the pressure on g6. Rook takes bishop. Queen to knight 2. It seems black's solid here. So is there any need for more analysis? But anyway, the master apparently play in his mind's eye looks at queen to king 3, and after bishop to queen 4 again, white has nothing. Actually, in this isolated queen pawn position, it's interesting that this bishop d5 is always going to be a strong move, just isolating that pawn and shotting out this bishop on the diagonal. So anyway, we'll go back to the start position again, and it says possibly knight to knight 4 is stronger. So knight to knight 4. So where will the black queen go? So queen to bishop 4 is apparently bad because of knight takes pawn check. So forking the king queen, so forcing pawn takes knight, and now apparently queen takes f5, e takes f5, and we'll notice here that this bishop's been unleashed, and so that pin is now effective. So rook takes knight check, and the king's in real trouble here, because if it goes to the h file, then the bishop is on the h6 pawn, so king h2, there'll be rook takes pawn check, king to knight 2, rook to rook 4, and white will be 2 pawns up. He's defending his isolated pawn here as well. He didn't really need to, because there'll be like a pin, you know, and this black's sacrificing the exchange with bishop c3 in this position. And if the king had gone to the other side with king f8, then there's a mate in 1. Bishop takes h6 mate. So so let's go back. So knight g4 is the most promising at the moment, with the idea of knight takes h6 check. So where could the black queen have gone? He looks at now queen takes queen pawn doesn't save him, as there is knight takes pawn check, pawn takes knight, rook takes knight, so really smashing up black's king position. Or alternatively, rook takes pawn on 28. So say queen takes here, even rook takes pawn will do, just ripping open to shreds black's position. That's not as clear cut though as just rook takes g6 according to Rybka. So rook takes g6, it's all over there. So basically, yeah, knight g4 seems the most tempting so far from the variations demonstrated, as though the master's thinking in that position. And the master apparently says, so is knight to knight 4 good, but what about queen to rook 5? Then knight takes pawn check, king to bishop 1. No, white cannot allow that. Queens are exchanged, and all his pieces and pre. So knight to knight 4 doesn't work. Let's look at other capsules on rook 6 and knight 6 again. Well, what does Rybka think actually? The master had it wrong there, because after queen takes, knight takes, Rybka in this position thinks white has at least 2 very good candidate moves here. So although his rook is en prise to the bishop, that would only be an exchange sack anyway, but his knight's en prise, so that's the more worrying one. But according to Rybka, there's actually 2 great candidate moves here.